Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly through the stone corridors of a medieval castle moonlight, slicing through arrow slits, the cold draft of damp stone brushing your skin as you wander barefoot. The air smells faintly of beeswax, stale rushes, and something sharper like secrets that have gone unspoken for too long. Beneath the echo of your steps, you can almost hear whispers, murmured prayers, promises, and perhaps the last cry of a girl who failed to be pure. You're not supposed to be here. You've wandered into a world with very different rules. Here in the medieval mind, a woman's value isn't her wit, her wisdom, or her kindness. It's a thin membrane of flesh, her virginity. Something you might lose through no fault of your own, and still be blamed for. And trust me, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake in a few minutes, post your city and local time in the comments. I always love to see where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the dim recesses of a convent scriptorium, where the flickering candlelight casts long shadows across delicate parchments. An old nun dips her quill into ink, copying a manuscript with reverent precision. The book she's working on contains rules for how girls should behave, written by men who believe they're safeguarding the soul. It tells of modesty, silence, obedience. It tells you that your body is a vessel and its purity is the only coin it carries. If you're a woman, virginity is your inheritance, your weapon, your prison, and your executioner. You slide past her unseen like a ghost. You've come here to understand what it meant to be a woman in medieval Europe, where society's tangled codes of honor, shame, and salvation were all fastened to a single fragile idea: virginity. It begins with the church, not just in sermons but in law, education, and punishment. Virginity was exalted as the ideal state of womanhood, a symbol of spiritual cleanliness, moral superiority, and even divine favor. The Virgin Mary was not just a sacred figure, she was the only model worth aspiring to. It didn't matter that she had a child, her body had remained miraculously untouched, the ultimate contradiction that medieval thinkers obsessed over. You might think this expectation was unattainable, and you'd be right. But it didn't stop anyone from enforcing it. Bishops and theologians pored over texts, debating not just whether virginity mattered, but how much it mattered. Was it more sacred than marriage, than motherhood? Some declared that virgins occupied a higher spiritual plane. Others believed that a woman who lost her virginity willingly or not was contaminated, diminished, no longer worthy of the same reverence. You walk through the cloister gardens where a young novice kneels in the dirt, whispering her prayers as she digs up weeds. Her fingers are raw, her lips cracked. She looks maybe 13. Her virginity is not her choice. She's here because her family couldn't afford a dowry, or maybe they owed a debt to the church. She's traded the marriage bed for a life of prayers and fasting, and to many, that's a noble exchange. A safe place to preserve what's most valuable about her, her untouched status. And if she breaks her vows, she could be whipped, imprisoned, shamed for eternity. But the world outside the convent isn't any easier. In noble courts, a girl's virginity was her family's honor, her father's bargaining chip. A single whispered rumor could ruin an alliance, cancel a betrothal, or start a feud. You're at a banquet now, velvet and silver shimmering under torchlight. Minstrels strum lutes while gossip buzzes like flies around the meat. At the center of it all sits a noble maiden, no more than 15, her hair carefully braided, her eyes fixed downward. She knows the stakes. Her purity is the invisible crown on her head. What happens if she's caught without it? Punishment took many forms: a broken engagement, a forced retreat into a convent. In worse cases, public shaming paraded through the streets in her shift, with her hair hacked short. Sometimes worse still, honor killings disguised as accidents, or swift and silent disappearances, forgotten by all but her mother. And the double standard. Oh, it was alive and well. Men could boast of conquest. Boys were taught that their strength lay in domination. A knight's reputation might even be improved by a few scandalous stories. But a girl. One mistake and she was ruined, even if it wasn't a mistake. Even if she was assaulted, the law might still see her as culpable, or at least suspicious. Because how could anyone prove she hadn't invited it? You pass through a village square, empty now save for a few chickens and the creaking sign of the tavern. But earlier there was a trial here. A young woman stood accused of seduction. Her lover was caught and claimed she tempted him. The priest believed him. The constable agreed. No one asked what she wanted. No one cared. Her virginity was gone. And that meant she was either wicked or worthless. Even in marriage, virginity's specter lingered. A bride was expected to bleed on the wedding night to prove her chastity with a crimson mark on the sheets. No blood. Then came the whispers. Perhaps she'd been defiled. Perhaps she was a liar. In some places, the family might return her like spoiled goods. In others, the husband could annul the union or punish her more directly. You drift through a room where two maids prepare a wedding chamber. They tuck in white sheets, scatter rosemary for fertility, and place a small cloth where it will catch the evidence, a relic of superstition, biology, and cruelty. One of them glances at the bed and sighs. Her sister was married last spring. She didn't bleed. Her husband didn't believe her. She hasn't been seen since. You're not dreaming, not quite, but the haze of sleep is starting to creep in. Still, you want to understand. Why did it matter so much? The answer is tangled in layers of fear, control, and the desperate need for certainty in a world where so much could go wrong. If a man wanted to be sure his children were his, virginity was the guarantee. If a king wanted to secure alliances, a virgin bride was the clean slate. If the church wanted to control women, chastity was the leash. And so here you are, walking quietly through the echoing centuries, watching women lose everything, not for what they did, but for what others assumed they did. Their stories don't always end in fire or blood. Sometimes they end in silence. A girl who smiles too easily. A wife who weeps behind a closed door. A nun who writes herself out of history. You keep walking. And just ahead, another story is waiting. You emerge from a crumbling chapel, its wooden beams bowed with age, and find yourself in the heart of a bustling medieval town. The smells of the market hit you first: sweat, bread, leather, and dung. Women are everywhere, hauling baskets, haggling, nursing babies. And yet, if you look closely, their presence is more tolerated than celebrated. A woman in the marketplace might be loud, clever, even indispensable, but underneath it all, she is still judged by a single measure: her virtue, her virginity. There's a young woman at the well. She's plain by noble standards, but her hair is neatly braided, her dress modest. A few boys tease her, nothing cruel, but just enough to make her cheeks flush. That blush, it's currency. Proof she hasn't grown hard or bold. Proof she's still innocent. A girl who doesn't blush is dangerous. She might know too much. She might be beyond saving. You pass a group of mothers exchanging gossip over bread and butter. One of them is whispering about her neighbor's daughter. 17 and still unmarried. Pretty enough, but too quick with her words, too confident. People have started to wonder, is she still pure? Is she hiding something? That's all it takes. Just wondering. And once the wondering begins, it rarely stops. You wander toward a wooden house where the shutters are closed tight. The family inside is wealthy by local standards. Their eldest daughter was supposed to marry the son of a well-off miller. The banns were read the arrangements set. But then a servant whispered something to someone, and someone whispered it to the wrong person. Now the match is off. The girl doesn't leave the house. Her mother says she's ill. But no one believes that. It doesn't matter whether the rumor is true. What matters is that it's stuck. Virginity once doubted is almost impossible to defend. There's no test you can take, no certificate to show. All you can do is be quiet, be obedient, and hope no one looks at you too long or too closely. You turn a corner and find yourself walking through the garden of a manor house. A noblewoman sits under a canopy embroidering. Her fingers are skilled, but her mind is elsewhere. She has daughters, 3 of them. The eldest is almost marriageable, and she worries. Not about her daughter's education or kindness or dreams, but about her value. That value lies in silence, in downcast eyes, in not knowing things. It lies in being untouched. And so she watches her daughters carefully. She speaks of honor, not fear, but her eyes are always scanning, always measuring. She knows that one wrong move could ruin everything. In medieval law, a woman's virginity was often tied to her legal standing. A deflowered woman was seen as damaged goods. In cases of rape, the law often treated non-virgins with skepticism. If she had already lost her virginity, how could she be violated? That was the logic. A cruel, circular logic that turned purity into both a shield and a target. You find yourself in a small courtroom, really just a cleared space in a lord's hall. A girl no more than 12 stands accused of being unchaste. There's no proof, only a boy's word and a mother's suspicions. She's weeping, and no one comforts her. Her parents are silent, ashamed. The judge, a balding man with a cold stare, asks if she confessed. She shakes her head. He sighs. That alone is suspicious. If she were truly innocent, wouldn't she defend herself more loudly? But if she did cry out, she'd be called impertinent. Either way, she loses. The sentence is not death, but it may as well be she is sent to a convent, stripped of her name, her clothes, and her future. And you begin to realize virginity wasn't just about sex. It was about control. It was about knowing where a woman belonged. The untouched woman was predictable, marriageable, marketable, but a woman with desire. A woman with knowledge of her own body that was dangerous. You pass into a small apothecary's shop, the shelves lined with dried herbs and strange powders. The woman who owns it, an old widow, sells potions to ease pain to help with childbirth. And sometimes, if you know the right words, to prevent it. The girls who come here do so secretly, hoods pulled low. Some are married, some are not. All of them are terrified. Because if anyone finds out, it won't be the man they slept with who's punished. It will be them. It's always them. You sit for a moment in the dim light, listening to the scrape of pestle and mortar. The apothecary does not speak, but her hands move with certainty. She knows that fear. She's lived it. Outside, the bells ring for vespers, and you follow the sound to a small stone church. Inside, candles flicker beside an image of the Virgin Mary. She stares down, serene and untouched, as the priest begins his homily. He speaks of purity of sacrifice, of the ideal woman. He says Mary is the perfect example, and all the girls in the pews bow their heads, not daring to wonder if they could ever be like her, not daring to ask if they should even want to be. You notice one girl in particular. She's maybe 16, her dress plain but neat. Her fingers twitch nervously in her lap. She's to be married soon to a man twice her age who has already buried 2 wives. Her family is proud. The match is good. But she's afraid. She knows what's expected. She knows she must prove herself. And if she fails, her life may never be hers again. The priest finishes his sermon with a reminder. Guard your virtue, daughters, for once lost it cannot be regained. You leave the church in silence. The air is thick, the sun setting behind red-tiled roofs. A group of boys plays with sticks in the street. One of them mocks a girl who walks by, asks if she's still holy. The others laugh. The girl keeps walking, shoulders stiff. And suddenly, it's all so clear. Virginity isn't about faith. It's not about morality. It's a story, one written by men, repeated by mothers, enforced by fear. A myth so deeply woven into the fabric of life that even those who suffer most from it help to keep it alive. You walk into a home where a mother warns her daughter never to speak to boys, where a sister reports on her siblings' blushes, where fathers measure their worth by how tightly they've sealed their daughters' fates. And the girls, they dream of something else, but quietly, always quietly. Because to speak too loudly might mean losing everything, and so the silence continues. Virginity becomes not just a part of life, but its precondition. You cannot be trusted, loved, protected, unless you have it. And once it's gone, nothing, not tears, not truth, not love can bring it back. You turn away from the street into the shadow of a high stone wall. Another story waits behind it. One where virginity becomes a weapon, where women fight not to keep it, but to survive its absence. The stone wall looms beside you, tall and pitted with age, its surface veined with moss and ivy. You follow it to a narrow iron gate just ajar and slip inside. The air grows heavier, the shadows deeper. You're entering the grounds of a castle now, not a royal palace of silk and gold, but a fortified manor, rigid and austere. The kind of place where bloodlines are guarded like treasure, and a daughter's chastity is considered a matter of statecraft. Inside, a chambermaid flits past with a bundle of linens bedsheets, clean and pressed. They aren't just for comfort. They're part of the ritual. Tonight, the Lord's only daughter is to be wed, and tomorrow morning, those linens will bear witness. You climb the stairs slowly, your hand brushing against the cold stone banister, and find yourself at the threshold of the bridal chamber. The room is lavish by medieval standards, tapestries on the wall, a carved oak bed, sprigs of rosemary in every corner. The bride is seated near the hearth, her hands clenched in her lap. Her maid is braiding her hair with practiced care, humming softly. But there's no joy in the air, only tension, thick and silent. She's young, 16, perhaps 17. You can see the unease in her eyes. Not fear of marriage exactly, it's the fear of failing some ancient, invisible test. If she bleeds, she's blessed. If she doesn't, she's damned. Her entire future depends on something she can't control. Her body will speak for her, and it had better say the right thing. You drift away, leaving her in silence, and pass into the great hall, where guests gather for the feast. The men drink heavily. They slap each other's backs, laugh with open mouths, speak in low, knowing tones. The bridegroom is among them, twice the girl's age, ruddy-faced and smug. He boasts to his cousin about his pure prize, laughing like he's already won something. No one calls it cruelty. No one even calls it unusual. That's the part that sinks in the utter normalcy of it all. You cross the room to where the women sit, quieter, clustered in corners. The bride's mother looks on face unreadable. She's done her duty, raised her daughter to be silent, obedient, and unspoiled. The deal is struck, the family's position secured. But somewhere behind her gaze you sense something else. A flicker of memory, perhaps. She went through this once, too. She survived it. So her daughter will, too. That's what she tells herself. A toast is made. The groom raises his goblet and declares his bride a true and virtuous maid. Everyone cheers, but no one asks her. The music plays, the guests dance, and later the doors to the bridal chamber close. You don't need to see what happens inside. You already know, and so do the servants. They wait in the hallway just outside, prepared to collect the proof. The stained cloth that will be paraded before the family, a flag of honor and success. If the cloth is clean, there are tricks, pinpricks to the bride's leg, the slaughter of doves, the theft of innocence from another creature just to fake her own. But deception is dangerous. If caught, she'll lose everything. You descend the servants' stairs and emerge in the kitchen, where a few maids exchange whispers. One of them once knew a girl who didn't bleed. She was kind, clever, innocent, but it didn't matter. The groom cried fraud, said he'd been tricked. She was returned to her father in shame, sent to a convent. Rumors still swirl that she'd been with a stable hand, or worse, a priest. No one knows. No one cares. Virginity is rarely about the truth. You leave the castle behind and follow a dirt path through the woods, your feet crunching leaves and twigs. The night air is colder now, still and expectant. You reach a village, its homes clustered like sleeping animals. In the center stands the longhouse where disputes are heard and local laws are read aloud. Tonight, a different kind of trial takes place. A girl stands before the elders accused of seducing her betrothed. They were seen walking together in the meadow, just the two of them laughing. He claimed nothing happened, but she was found later alone and disheveled. She says he forced her. He denies it. The elders exchange glances, muttering. Was she truly unwilling? Was she truly innocent? The burden lies with her to prove what she no longer possesses. Her mother pleads. Her father says nothing. He's already negotiating with another family, desperate to save face. In the end, they make her marry him anyway. Problem solved. You move past the longhouse deeper into the night. The stars above are hard and bright. You enter a barn where two girls hide in the hayloft, whispering. One of them was caught kissing a boy. Just kissing. Now she's afraid her father will beat her, or worse, send her away. Her friend promises to help, but even as she speaks, you can hear the doubt. Because in their world, being seen is sometimes all it takes. A glance, a smile, a misstep, and the judgment falls. The boys they kissed will suffer no such fate. And this imbalance isn't limited to peasants or nobles. You remember another tale told in hushes behind chapel doors, the story of a princess whose wedding was delayed because a maid claimed to know a secret. The princess, she said, had once ridden alone with a squire. The king was furious. The squire vanished. The princess swore innocence. She even submitted to examination an ordeal of shame and humiliation conducted by matrons and midwives. They declared her intact, and only then was the wedding allowed. But no one ever asked whether that ride meant anything, whether she had any say, whether the fear and the shame were deserved. Back on the road, you walk beside a cloaked figure, an old midwife traveling between villages. She's seen it all. Births and deaths, unions and undoings. She tells you of the herbs girls begged for, the secrets mothers kept, the punishments that rained down not on rapists, but on survivors. She tells you of daughters who ran, and of those who stayed, and broke quietly under the weight of silence. She knows the stories carved into bodies. She's delivered the babies of women who were married at 12. She's held the hands of girls who prayed not for salvation, but for disappearance. She's tired, but she keeps walking. There's always another girl in trouble, and so you walk with her, the sky lightening, just a little dawn not far off. Another day will begin, and with it, the cycle will repeat. Girls taught to be good, to be quiet, to be untouched. Boys taught to take, to boast, to forget. And everyone, absolutely everyone, believing that this is simply how the world works. But you know better now. You've seen behind the doors, beneath the veils. You've heard the stories that don't get written in the chronicles or sung in the great halls. You've heard the hush. And ahead of you, more stories wait. Stories of women who refused to be erased. The path winds toward the coast, now the air tinged with salt and the scent of drying fish. You follow the shoreline to a quiet abbey perched on a cliff, its weathered stone walls overlooking the endless churn of waves. Here the sea has no concern for virginity, no interest in judgment. But inside those walls, the rules are carved just as deep as anywhere else. The abbey is a house of reformed women, some widowed, some pious, and some disgraced. They wear the same robes, chant the same psalms, keep the same hours. But not all arrived by choice. A few were cloistered by families eager to conceal a scandal, or by husbands who found them insufficient. Here, among the prayers and silence, virginity becomes something mourned, envied, or feigned. You step inside the chapel, where the sisters kneel on cold stone, their chants low and rhythmic. One woman in the back row clutches her rosary tightly. Her name is not the one she was born with. It was given to her upon arrival, part of the ritual of purification. No one speaks of her past, but the other sisters know. She once had a lover, maybe more than one, and when her father found out, she was sent here to repent for a life she hadn't even begun to live. In the abbey's refectory, a visiting bishop offers a sermon during the meal. He speaks of Magdalene, the repentant woman, and urges the sisters to thank God for his mercy. You catch a flicker of something in one of the older nuns' eyes, irony perhaps. She has heard this story too many times. She knows the church offers forgiveness only when there's shame first. That same shame that gets painted on every girl who dares to know herself. And Magdalene, was she even what they claimed? Scripture is unclear, but the medieval church rarely let ambiguity get in the way of a good example. A fallen woman redeemed by submission. That's the model. That's the script. You leave the abbey behind and walk along a dirt path through heather and wind-blown grasses. In the distance, a shepherdess moves among her flock, her dog at her side. She's alone here, far from the eyes of town or family. In a way, she's free. But even here, rumors can reach. If she returns home pregnant, there will be no questions for the man, only consequences for her. Maybe she's careful. Maybe she has no interest in anyone, but it won't matter. If something happens, she'll be seen as having invited it. Because women are never seen as fully passive, not in sin, only in blame. You pass an old woman tending to her herbs beside a stream. She's known as a wise woman, perhaps even a witch to some. Girls come to her in secret, not for love spells or beauty charms, but for solutions. For pennyroyal tansy mugwort. For ways to end something that never should have started. The old woman doesn't ask questions. She just measures mixes and instructs. But if the church finds her, she'll be accused of heresy, or worse, of corrupting virgins. It's strange, isn't it, how fragile virginity is said to be, yet how heavily it is guarded. Treated like a brittle crystal on the edge of a cliff, constantly threatened, and yet expected to remain unbroken under every pressure. You find yourself in a merchant's home now, where a girl is being prepared for marriage. Her father is a wealthy man, hoping to elevate his family with this union. The groom is respectable, educated, and calculating. The girl sits still as her aunt adjusts the veil and recites the virtues of silence, obedience, and patience. "Speak softly," she says, "and show no pride." A husband values modesty. No one talks about her thoughts or fears. No one asks if she wants this. She's told to be grateful that the man chose her. And to preserve her reputation, she must be pure, but not just untouched. She must also appear ignorant, unaware of anything that might suggest sexual knowledge. It's not enough to be a virgin. She must perform it too. You watch her practice her smile in the mirror. Not too wide, not too knowing, just enough to suggest innocence. It's a strange sort of theater, and the audience is always watching. Downstairs, the contracts are being signed, the dowry arranged. The bridegroom's family will take possession not only of her body, but of her image, her future. Any hint of past impropriety even imagined could unravel everything. That's why they've employed a chaperone for the last 6 months. That's why her younger brother was instructed to follow her any time she left the house. No one protected her for her own sake. They protected her to preserve her market value. The ceremony is brief. A blessing, an exchange of vows, a cup of wine passed between them. And then, as expected, they disappear to the chamber. This time there's no blood. But the groom doesn't complain. He's practical and the family is wealthy. Still, he tells her softly he hopes she was honest. There's weight in that word, isn't there, honest? Not safe, not faithful, just virgin. You slip into a nearby tavern where 2 women sit beside the hearth. They're older now, long past the days of being watched for signs of virtue. One was married 3 times. The other never wed at all. They speak freely without apology. One of them laughs and says she lost her virginity before she ever understood what it meant, and paid the price for years. The other nods, sipping her ale. They don't want women, she says they want stories they can control. And maybe that's what it really comes down to. Virginity isn't about biology. It's not even about morality. It's about storytelling, about being the right kind of character in someone else's narrative. The maiden, the bride, the martyr. And if you step outside those roles, if you rewrite your part, you risk becoming the villain, or worse, the forgotten. You leave the tavern and follow a quiet path through the woods again, the sky thick with stars. Somewhere behind you, girls are being warned, watched, trained to guard a part of themselves that isn't even visible but somehow always on display. And ahead, more doors, more secrets, more lives twisted by an idea so flimsy it vanishes under scrutiny, and yet powerful enough to end a girl's world. The wind picks up, and you pull your cloak tighter. Another village is just ahead. Another tale waits. One where virginity isn't just a measure of worth, but the weapon others use to decide if you deserve to live. You reach the outskirts of the next village as dawn breaks soft orange light slipping over the thatched roofs. Smoke curls from chimneys and roosters crow as if nothing in the world is amiss. But beneath this sleepy surface, something festers, whispers judgments, and the quiet cruelty that can destroy a life without drawing a drop of blood. At the village green, a notice has been nailed to a post. The scribe's handwriting is neat and deliberate. It announces the punishment of a local girl named Cecily, whose engagement has been dissolved on suspicion of carnal trespass. No trial, no evidence, just suspicion. She was seen walking alone in the woods with a boy from the next hamlet. That boy, he's off to apprentice in the city. She's being confined to her father's home until a decision is made. The notice ends with a reminder, guard your daughters, that shame may not befall your house. You pass a group of villagers reading it aloud, tongues clucking, eyes narrow. Some shake their heads in pity. Others smirk. Cecily's younger sister stands nearby, watching with hollow eyes. She's learned something essential today. Her future depends not just on what she does, but on what others think she's done. You step away down a dirt lane where laundry flaps in the breeze and find a cottage where a woman sews in silence. She's stitching a fine shift for her daughter's wedding, a simple garment white and unadorned. The cloth is plain but symbolic. It will be the last thing her daughter wears as a maiden. The mother's hands are steady, but her mind drifts. She remembers her own wedding night, the fear, the uncertainty, and the relief, yes, relief, when the stain appeared on the sheet. Not because it meant anything to her, but because it saved her from disgrace. Her daughter Betha enters with a basket of herbs. She's cheerful, glowing with the excitement of a girl in love. She thinks she's lucky her betrothed is kind, gentle. He says he doesn't care about that sort of thing. But the mother knows how quickly words can change when honor is questioned. She says nothing, just keeps sewing. The truth is, even in the best circumstances, virginity hangs over a girl like an invisible sword. It doesn't matter how kind her groom is, how progressive his family seems. The threat is always there, that if she bleeds, she'll be praised. If she doesn't, she'll be interrogated. You walk into a small church nearby where the local priest gives confession behind a screen. A young girl kneels whispering sins she doesn't understand. I touched myself, she says. I thought of Tom, the cooper's son. The priest's breath hitches. He tells her to pray for forgiveness and to cleanse her thoughts. Guard your purity, he warns. The devil watches with hungry eyes. She nods ashamed. But what she's really learned is that her body is not hers. Even her thoughts must be virginal. You move through the church's back door into a narrow alley where two boys laugh and boast about the girls they've kissed. One mimics a girl's cry, the other brags he'll have her before harvest. No shame. No consequences. They're praised for their boldness, admired for their conquest. If the girl falls pregnant, it'll be her disgrace. He might deny it or marry her out of obligation, but it won't ruin him. It never does. And still, people pretend the system is just. That purity is noble, even empowering. But purity in this world is not freedom, it's servitude. A currency that diminishes the moment it's spent, even if spent against your will. You follow the road out of the village and pass a small shrine by the riverbank. A carved wooden statue of a woman stands beneath it, haloed and weeping. Offerings are scattered at her feet, ribbons, herbs, tokens. This is the Virgin of the Ford, a local spirit adopted into Christian tradition. Girls leave tributes here before weddings asking for protection. But some come alone late at night to ask for something else. A girl arrives now barefoot and trembling. She kneels in the mud and whispers a plea. You can't hear all of it, but you catch fragments. Don't let them know I didn't say yes. I don't want to marry him. She places a small cloth doll at the statue's feet and slips away unseen. You follow her for a time. Her name is Eleanor, and she's only 14. A neighboring landholder has offered to take her as a bride. Her father agreed. Eleanor doesn't hate the man, but she dreads the marriage. She dreads what it means. Her body, still growing, will be expected to bear children within the year. Her virginity is the price of admission to adulthood. She's heard stories of girls who bled for days, who screamed and cried on their wedding night. She doesn't want that. But no one asks what she wants. In her mind, she wonders if she might escape, run away, join the nuns, drown herself in the Ford. The options are bleak, but to many girls like her, they feel real. Because virginity isn't just about sex, it's about survival. You keep walking. Another village, another tale. This one darker. At its edge, an abandoned cottage crumbles into the earth. Once it housed a family of modest means. Their daughter Elfrida was raped by a soldier passing through with a mercenary company. Her father demanded justice, but the soldier was gone by morning. The village turned on her. Why was she alone, they asked. Why didn't she scream? Even the priest was cautious in his judgment. She may have led him on, he said. It's hard to know. Elfrida was sent away. Her family left soon after, unable to bear the shame. No one knows where they are now. No one tried to find them. You kneel in the overgrown weeds of their yard, listening to the wind in the trees. This is what the cult of virginity does. It creates martyrs out of innocence, criminals out of victims, and silence out of injustice. As you rise, a little girl peers at you from the road. She waves shyly, then runs back to her mother. You wonder what stories that mother will tell. Will she teach her daughter to hide, to be afraid to submit, or will she teach her to speak, to challenge, to resist? The sun climbs higher. The path forks again. One road leads to a noble estate, the other to a monastery known for keeping women safe. But safety in this world often means confinement. Chastity belts, oaths, perpetual supervision, locks and keys and prayers. You choose neither path for now. You turn to the quiet road, the one few walk, the road of women who stepped outside the script, who said no or never or not like this. They paid the price, but they left stories behind. And you're going to find them. The quiet road stretches before you, lined with gnarled oaks and half-forgotten stone markers, their etchings worn by wind and time. It leads you away from villages and feudal estates, away from convents and halls of judgment, into the liminal spaces where the women who didn't fit the mold were forced to live or chose to live, depending on who tells the story. Here the air is different. There's no church bell tolling the hours, no eyes watching from behind shutters. You pass a stream and follow it into a glade where 3 women sit around a low fire. They aren't nuns, nor noblewomen, nor peasants. They are something else entirely, healers, midwives, maybe witches, depending on who you ask. Their clothes are plain, their faces weathered. They speak in a mix of Latin, French, and local dialect. The kind of women who know too much and are therefore both feared and needed. One of them, Isbeth, tells you a story. There was a girl, she begins, from a good family, promised to a knight. She was clever, read Latin, asked questions. She stirs the pot at her feet, not looking at you. One day she fell in love with a scribe. They planned to run away, but they were caught. She wasn't pregnant. She wasn't even defiled by their standards. But she had kissed him, touched him, laughed with him. That was enough. What happened, you ask? She was sent to a house for wayward women, Isbeth says. Not a prison, but not free either. She lived under rule. No books, no letters, her name forgotten. Her story ends there. You sit in silence. It's not the first tale like this you've heard, but it's one of the few where the girl had wanted it consensual, joyful even, and still she was punished. Because virginity was not about whether it was taken. It was about whether it had been given. Even willingly, that was a crime. The fire pops and another woman older pipes up. It's all about lineage, isn't it? She says. A man wants to be sure his heirs are his. Can't have a bastard claiming land. So they make girls into vaults locked and sealed. And if the lock's broken, they throw the whole chest away. They cackle bitterly like ravens in the dark. Not because they enjoy the memory, but because the only other option is to cry. You walk on through the woods until you reach a small shrine hidden among the trees. It's made of stone, covered in moss, and dedicated to Saint Agnes, patron saint of virgins. A wooden plaque tells of her martyrdom, refusing to marry, preserving her chastity, even unto death. She was dragged naked through the streets of Rome, then beheaded. Her purity was more valuable than her life, and because she chose death, she was canonized. But you wonder, did she really choose, or was she simply given no other option that left her soul intact? You kneel there for a moment, touching the cool stone. A girl might come here before her wedding night, praying not to bring shame, or after an assault, praying to be believed. But the saint remains silent, her virtue carved in legend, her pain airbrushed into holiness. You leave offerings a sprig of rosemary, a piece of cloth, and continue on. Further down the path, you come to a village that no longer exists on any map. Just a few ruined foundations and a crumbling church roof, collapsed vines swallowing its stone bones. Inside, faded paintings still cling to the walls, images of the Virgin Mary, serene and glowing, surrounded by cherubs. But in one corner, nearly hidden, there's something stranger. A mural of a woman with no face, only a mirror in place of her head. Around her are words in Latin, Custos secreti serva te ipsam. Keeper of the secret, guard yourself. You trace the mirror's outline with your finger. This wasn't painted by a priest. This was someone else. A woman, perhaps. A warning or a message. That your body is a secret, a burden, a test. And no matter how carefully you guard it, others will still try to take it or judge you for having it too long. Back in the sunlight, you find an old journal tucked in the ruins, written in a cramped, looping script. A woman's voice again, this time, not a story about disgrace, but one of quiet defiance. I married at 14, it reads. My husband was gentle, but I did not bleed. My mother-in-law whispered I must have known another man. I swore I hadn't. Still, they locked me in the cold cellar for 3 days. When they let me out, he touched me as if I were a glass he didn't trust. It was a year before he smiled again, and even longer before I forgave myself for something I never did. You hold the journal like a relic. This was not a noblewoman, not a saint, just someone trying to be believed. There's more recipes, prayers, a poem in the back. One line stands out. Let them speak of blood, I will speak of fire. You carry those words with you as you descend a ridge and see in the valley below a gathering of tents. A summer festival music drifting through the trees, laughter on the breeze. For a moment it feels like another world. A space where rules are relaxed, where boys and girls dance freely unchaperoned. But even here, old habits persist. You wander among the revelers unnoticed. A girl dances with her sweetheart beneath the lanterns. An old woman watches them and mutters, "She's tempting fate dancing like that." A few men nearby joke about which girls are ripe and which ones are ruined. One even offers to test the goods for someone too shy to try. And no one corrects them. Not really. The festival glimmers with joy, but beneath it, the same calculations unfold. Who is available? Who is untouched? Who is worthy? And it's always the girls being measured, weighed, spoken of like apples in a market stall. You leave before the fires burn down. The night has turned cool again, and you begin to see how deeply the myth has sunk in. Even in laughter, even in song, even in celebration, there's the echo of that demand, be clean, be innocent, or be nothing at all. Ahead, the road bends toward the capital, toward court, toward kings and queens, where virginity isn't just sacred, it's weaponized, political, public, and it is there that the story sharpens, where a queen's body is both crown and battleground. So you walk on, toward the throne, toward the royal marriage bed, and the blood that history demands from every woman who dares to take power. You reach the city walls just as the sun slips behind the battlements, casting long shadows across the cobbled road. The capital is a living beast. Its stone streets pulse with footsteps. Its towers stretch like spines against the sky, and its people churn in 1,000 directions. But no matter how loud or vast it becomes, you can still hear the whisper beneath it all, virginity. Even here, amid gold and marble, it reigns. The palace looms ahead, a complex of gleaming spires and guarded gates. You slip past servants carrying trays of meat pies and spiced wine, past scribes with ink-stained hands, and courtiers with sharp tongues. They speak in riddles and riddled glances, but the stories are the same: who has value, who has virtue, who has secrets sewn beneath their silk gowns. In the queen's chambers, candles are being lit. The current queen, a foreign princess brought across the sea, sits at her dressing table staring into a mirror as her ladies prepare her for bed. She's young, barely 18, her hair pinned high and threaded with pearls. Her marriage was a spectacle, the bedding ceremony a ritual so public it blurred the line between religion and voyeurism. You remember how they laid out the linens, the guests lining the hallway, listening for sounds through the door, like gamblers waiting for the outcome of a roll. And the next morning, there was no blood. The court erupted. Some whispered she had been spoiled before the wedding, others that she was too cold, too boyish, unnatural. The king, embarrassed, refused to speak for days, and her father-in-law demanded she undergo examination by the royal physicians. She was stripped, prodded, and declared intact, though some still muttered that the exam was staged, that her family had bribed someone. You watch her now, silent in her reflection. She is still queen. But she knows she walks a threadbare line. Her power rests not on her crown, but on the idea of purity that others insist she represent. A single misstep and everything would unravel. You step away, following the corridors to the great hall, where the tapestry of her wedding hangs in triumph. It shows her as the virgin bride flanked by angels, her hands folded in holy obedience. The artistry is exquisite. The lie is complete. In another wing of the palace, you find a princess, her cousin, perhaps sitting alone in a study, poring over a book of herbal lore. She's no fool. She knows what's expected of her, a pristine reputation, a politically advantageous marriage, and a womb prepared to produce heirs. She reads not for pleasure, but for preparation. She's memorizing the signs of pregnancy, the ways to fake chastity, the dangers of childbirth. She does this not because she intends to rebel, but because she knows she might have no choice but to survive. She closes the book and looks out the window at the palace gardens. You follow her gaze to a statue there, another virgin saint, hands outstretched, eyes uplifted. The girl's lips twist. It's always the same story, she murmurs to herself. Be silent. Be pure. Be grateful. But she doesn't say it with bitterness. She says it with precision. She's calculating. Because in court, virginity isn't just a virtue, it's leverage. If she marries a foreign prince while still unblemished, her body becomes a treaty, a blank page on which alliances are written. You leave her to her thoughts and follow the path outside into the gardens. Two noblewomen walk side by side, speaking in clipped tones about a third girl new to court, with no dowry but a well-known name. She's rumored to be too friendly with her dancing master. She'll never land a husband now, one says. Her mother should have kept her locked up. And there it is again, that invisible cage. Not steel bars, but expectations enforced with words sharper than swords. Virginity is framed as freedom from shame, but what it really offers is the constant threat of shame, like a leash pulled tight. You find the girl they're talking about, sitting beside a fountain, eyes rimmed red. She knows the whispers. She knows she did nothing, but that doesn't matter. Her silence won't save her. Her dignity won't save her. The story has been told without her consent, and now she has to live with it. So she sits and waits for what? For a marriage to someone desperate enough not to care, for banishment to a rural estate, for scandal to fade. The options shrink with every day she remains unmarried and rumored. Back inside the palace, you walk into a chamber with heavy velvet curtains and a table strewn with parchment. This is where royal marriages are arranged. Here the chancellor, the bishop, and the chamberlain debate candidates not for their minds, but for their bloodlines and reputations. One nobleman, recently widowed, is being offered a girl of 14. She's untouched, of course, the bishop says. Her tutor swears she's unspoiled. The others nod. That is what matters. Not her desires, not her readiness. Just that single unbroken fact. And if it's broken, the marriage can be annulled, the alliance shattered. Lands, titles, and political favors can be lost because of what someone did or claimed someone did to a girl, long before she even understood what was at stake. In the royal archives, a dusty scroll recounts a notorious case, a noblewoman accused of seduction by her own betrothed, who sought to break the contract in favor of a richer match. She insisted on her innocence. Witnesses testified to her virtue, but the matter was settled not with facts, but with an ordeal, a trial by water. She was thrown into a river, her hands bound. If she sank, she was innocent. If she floated guilty, she sank. Her body was retrieved days later, cold and broken. Her name was cleared, but her story ended there. You leave the archive in silence, the candle flickering in its iron sconce. The pages didn't just record history, They preserved injustice in meticulous script, like a monument with no soul. Outside, the city is alive with sound vendors hawking wares, musicians playing lutes, children laughing. But in every face you begin to see it now. The weight of the script, the girls who avoid eye contact, the boys who strut knowing the rules favor them, the mothers who warn their daughters to walk in groups, the fathers who boast about protecting what's theirs, and the women who do not speak at all anymore. They have learned that silence is safer than truth, that to admit knowledge, pleasure, or even curiosity is to invite judgment, that virginity is not just something they were told to guard, but something others felt entitled to inspect. As the palace shrinks behind you, you walk toward the edge of the city where the streets turn to dirt and the buildings grow sparse. A convent lies ahead, and beyond it, the countryside. But your steps slow. You've seen enough for now. You sit beneath an olive tree where a girl once sat 100 years ago, weeping after her wedding night. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. She didn't bleed. She didn't cry out. She didn't pass the test. She was sent away. Her story, like so many others, was folded into silence. But you've heard her now. And the echo of her shame, shaped by centuries of myth and fear, still hangs in the air like incense. You breathe it in not to keep it, but to carry it forward, to remember. And ahead of you, down a winding path, lies another kind of silence. Not the silence of shame, but of resistance. The women who fought, who wrote, who refused. You're not there yet, but you will be. You rise from beneath the olive tree, just as the bells toll in the convent ahead, matins or vespers, you're not sure. The sound is solemn, cold, echoing off the stone like a ghost's breath. You follow the narrow path through the trees toward the old iron gate. A nun lets you pass without looking up. She's seen plenty like you, silent, searching, a little too curious. The convent is ancient. Ivy clings to its walls, its cloisters worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. You step into the chapel first, where candles flicker in a darkened nave. The Virgin watches from the stained glass window above the altar, her eyes downcast, lips sealed. She is everywhere on the walls, the vestments, the carved choir stalls, always serene, always untouched, the eternal maiden. But these women around you, they are not untouched, not all of them. Many came here with pasts. Some were sent for punishment, others for safety, a few by choice. They are women who could not or would not play the game outside. And yet even here they are never free of it. You pass a younger nun in the cloister garden digging in the earth. Her hands are dirty, but her habit pristine. She hums softly, a tune not quite sacred. You sit beside her unseen and listen as she murmurs a story to the herbs. I was 12 when they told me I was to marry, she says. He was old, already had sons. My mother wept when she thought I wasn't listening. My father only said, "At least she's still pure," as if that were the only thing that mattered. She pauses, brushing soil from a sprig of thyme. I begged to come here instead. To serve God, they said. But really it was to disappear. I've been here 10 years now. I still don't know if I'm grateful. You move on through the dormitories where girls sleep in tidy rows, their dreams curling quietly into the rafters. Some are here temporarily, young noble daughters being kept safe until marriage. Their families pay the abbess to ensure nothing happens to their virtue, as if prayer and candlelight are more effective than locks and swords. You pass one such girl reading a psalter with furrowed brows. She looks up when she thinks no one is watching, eyes dark with frustration. You imagine she's memorizing the prayers only so she can recite them perfectly and be sent away sooner. She doesn't want God's approval. She wants the world's, or more likely, her father's. In the scriptorium, older sisters copy manuscripts, religious texts, of course, but also midwifery manuals, healing recipes, and sometimes history. You come across one nun bent over a vellum sheet, her calligraphy precise. But as you draw closer, you notice something strange. Between the lines of Latin scripture, faint words are etched almost invisible. A different hand, a hidden voice. You strain to read, she bled, and they rejoiced. I bled, and they called it sin. Another, the virgin is safe, the mother is sacred, the widow is wise. But the girl who says yes, she must be erased. You want to ask who wrote them. But no one speaks, no one dares. You leave the convent and return to the road. The hills roll beneath a soft sky now streaked with gray. The wind carries a whisper of ash. Not far ahead, you come upon a ruined village. Charred wood, half-burnt timbers, broken wagons. It was razed by soldiers, raiders, or something quieter like fear. At the village edge, a post still stands, blackened but upright. You know what it once held. A woman, maybe more than one, branded a witch, accused of seduction, sorcery, perhaps a stillbirth blamed on her evil eye. Her crime may have been a red ribbon, a bold word, a pregnancy without a wedding. You crouch in the ashes and find something buried, a ring simple and iron, a promise, perhaps, or a memory. Someone loved her once, or claimed to, before the fire. You move on. The next town is quieter, small, cautious. You pause at a bakery where the girl behind the counter doesn't speak, just hands you a crust of bread with eyes lowered. Later you learn she was assaulted by the Baron's steward last summer. Her parents dared not accuse him. Instead, they said she had been led astray. She's lucky, they say. She wasn't pregnant, but you can see it in her. The retreat, the way she folds herself smaller. She hasn't spoken in months. The village still buys bread. They just don't look her in the eye. You leave the crust untouched. Further on, you find an old woman in a moss-covered hut, nearly blind, her back bent from years. She tells you without prompting that she used to be beautiful. The baker's daughter. Men lined up to court her. But one touched her too soon, and when she tried to speak out, they said she'd begged for it. She was 15. I didn't even know what wanting was, she says bitterly. But they told me I wanted. They decided. She waves her gnarled hand toward the forest. I came here to forget. But you never forget the first time someone makes your body into a lie. That word again, lie. You've heard it whispered like a fog through every chapter of this world. Virginity isn't truth. It's performance. And no matter how you live, someone else is always writing your part. You walk to the outskirts of a larger town now where a statue of a queen rises from the square. She's carved in marble, one hand holding a book, the other pointing skyward. The inscription calls her a woman of virtue and wisdom. But you know her story. She was married at 13, gave birth at 15, fended off accusations of adultery when her husband fell ill and left her alone with a kingdom to manage. She ruled with brilliance, but what people remember is that a courtier once claimed he saw her chamber door ajar after dark. That was enough to stain her. For decades after men wrote poems debating whether she had remained chaste after her husband died. Not whether she ruled well, not whether she kept the peace, whether she kept her legs closed. You laugh quietly, bitterly, and someone nearby hears. A girl in her 20s kneeling to wash stone steps looks up. "You know, don't you?" she says. Not as a question, but as recognition. About the way they watch us, the way they measure what can't be seen. You nod. She smiles, tired and full of knowing. They'll always say it's for our own good, but it's never for us. You leave her with that truth hanging in the air like incense. As the sky deepens, you feel it rising, a shift. You're walking not among victims now, but among witnesses. Women who've learned how to survive, to speak, to write between the lines. Their stories were nearly erased, but not quite. They endure in scraps of parchment, in whispered songs, in the hush of convent gardens, and the soot of burned villages, and you are gathering them, one by one. You step back onto the road, with a strange sense of weight in your chest, as though every woman you've met is walking beside you, now speaking without speaking. The path dips into a valley where the grass grows thick and the earth feels soft underfoot. And waiting at the bottom is a low stone structure with a slate roof, a school of sorts. One for girls funded by a wealthy widow who'd once been a lady-in-waiting at court. Inside, girls sit on benches carved with initials worn smooth by years of fidgeting fingers. Their teacher, a woman with gray hair and soft eyes, writes Latin phrases on the board. These girls are learning how to read and recite, how to copy out prayers and polite letters, but you sense the undercurrent. This is not about learning for learning's sake. It is about respectability, about proving they are worth something before someone decides otherwise. In one corner, a girl works more slowly than the rest. Her hand trembles as she writes. You learn her name is Matilda, and she was taken in after her parents were run out of their village. The rumor that Matilda had spoken to a man in the orchard. Nothing more. The man denied it, but it didn't matter. Her mother begged the school to take her. She's still a virgin, she insisted. Still innocent. As if innocence were something you could wrap in cloth and hand to another person for safekeeping. The teacher walks past, nods approvingly at Matilda's script, then gently adjusts the collar of her dress. Chin up, child, she says. People respect modest girls. Matilda nods, eyes down. She's memorized the lesson already. Not the Latin, but the choreography of shame. Outside in the garden behind the school, girls sweep gravel paths and hum psalms. One girl dares a smile and whispers to another about a boy she saw at Mass. The other girl gasps, delighted and terrified. Don't let mistress hear, she says. You'll be kept in on feast day. Even a glance can be punished. A daydream can be disobedience. Because you're not just expected to be pure, you must be untouched by even the idea of wanting. You move along the hedge toward a hill with a small cross planted in its crown. At its base sits a plaque, commemorating a different kind of girl, one who died in disgrace according to the stone. No name, no date. Just the phrase, she was warned. And you think about that word. Warned. How often it appears in stories like these. Warnings about skirts too short, walks too long, smiles too wide. Warnings about being seen, about being believed, about being blamed. Warnings given to girls from the moment they can understand language. And what are boys taught? Not much, sometimes nothing at all. You cross the ridge and arrive at a manor house where preparations for a wedding are underway. Silks are airing on the line, servants rush to and fro, and a priest is rehearsing a benediction in the courtyard. Inside, the bride sits with her maid, trying on a delicate veil. Her name is Eleanor. Her fiancé is a baron with a title and some money, older but not unkind. Still, she's nervous. She whispers to her maid, "I'm afraid." "What if I don't bleed?" The maid, more experienced, shrugs. "There are tricks, my lady. I can show you. Or we could." She hesitates. "There's a herb I've heard of. Just a few drops and it'll look the part." Eleanor blinks. "Even if I am." The maid doesn't answer. Because the truth is, sometimes being a virgin isn't enough. You must prove it, simulate it, sacrifice to it. And there is no forgiveness if your body doesn't follow the script. Later that evening, you watch the wedding from a shadowed archway. The couple exchanges vows beneath a trellis of ivy. Eleanor looks composed, luminous, but you know she's holding her breath. You saw her palm the cloth from her maid's drawer, just in case. This is what virginity has become: a gamble, a performance, a burden heavier than any crown. You drift from the manor and into the forest again, where older paths crisscross in silence. And deep within the trees, you stumble upon a moss-covered stone ring, a sacred site from long before Christianity. People still leave offerings here. Flowers, charms, bones. You notice a necklace, cheap tin, heart-shaped, hanging from a branch, and carved into the stone below it in barely legible script. He said I was his only one, then called me a whore. It's not a prayer. It's not a curse. It's a ledger entry. A quiet note to the world that this place, this idea, is haunted. Further into the forest, you find another cottage. This one hums with energy. Inside lives a woman who keeps no name. People call her aunt, though she has no kin. Girls visit her in secret, bringing eggs, honey, or sometimes nothing at all. She listens. She brews. She teaches them how to find wild herbs, how to calm their breath, how to name the things no one else will let them name. She tells you of a girl who once came to her in tears, thinking she was ruined. She hadn't even been touched, Aunt says. Just told a boy she liked his eyes. But her uncle saw, said she was fast. She shakes her head. They make us believe our own minds are dangerous, that wanting anything means we're dirty. You ask her what the remedy is. Remedy, she says, there is none. There's only remembering, passing it down, telling the truth even when it's buried. You sit by her fire as night settles in. She hums a tune you don't recognize, and the wind outside sounds almost like breath, soft, mournful, constant. You leave quietly before dawn, following the trail of footprints pressed into wet grass. And now the stories begin to gather speed. You're no longer moving from tale to tale like an observer. You're a collector, a witness. You're starting to see the larger shape, the system that linked blood and honor, silence and power. The way women were turned into property symbols, scapegoats, saints, or cautionary tales, but never just people. Ahead lies a place where that system begins to fray, where some dared to break it, where scandal didn't destroy, but revealed. The city awaits. Not the capital this time, but the kind where poets, prostitutes, midwives, and scholars walk the same streets. And for the first time in this journey, you're not entirely alone. You descend from the forested ridge just as the rooftops of the city appear through the early mist, slate shingles glinting like scales. church spires stabbing upward, and chimneys exhaling slow, smoky breaths. This is not the city of crowns and courtiers. This is the city of alleyways, ink-stained manuscripts, and whispered poems passed beneath tavern tables. A place where lives cross like threads often unnoticed, but occasionally knotted into something louder, something like defiance. The gates stand open. A cart rattles past, loaded with sacks of flour, and a rooster that crows miserably. You step aside as children weave through the crowd, shouting and laughing, chased by a woman clutching a broom. But your attention is drawn to the building just beyond the square, a printing shop. Inside, a girl, no older than 16, arranges type. She works quickly, her hands blackened with ink, her eyes sharp. Her name is Julita. Her father runs the press, but she's the one who knows how to set the poems without smudging the punctuation, how to fix the broken levers. She shouldn't be here. Girls in trades are frowned upon. But after her brother died last year, she became indispensable. You see her slip a folded paper into her sleeve. Not a receipt. A page torn from an anonymous pamphlet. Later you'll find out what it said. The Virgin is only valuable to those who fear her mind. You move through the market where vendors call out prices for fish and fruit. But beneath the surface noise, there's something else. Gossip. A merchant's wife has left her husband. A laundress is pregnant, but refuses to name the father. A girl from the Scribes Guild was seen drinking with a foreign poet. These aren't just idle stories. They're warnings wrapped in laughter. Women who misstep don't vanish. They get talked into oblivion. Near the well, you see a group of women, old and young, gathered around a stone bench. They're not noble nor especially educated, but they speak with precision. One of them, Mireille, says softly, she refused him. That's why they say she's ruined. Men don't care about truth, they care about being told yes. Or not being told no. Another nods. If you don't bleed, they call you liar. If you do, they call you slut. There's no winning. You sit among them. They don't ask who you are. They recognize you're quiet, you're listening. You are one of the ones who wants to know. They offer you bread tea, steeped with mint, and more stories than you can hold. One speaks of a girl who swallowed thorns to injure herself before her wedding night, so her husband wouldn't think her used. Another recalls how her cousin was disowned for wearing red on a holy day and laughing too loudly in the company of men. You ask if they ever considered leaving, escaping this net. Mireille only chuckles. Escape isn't always freedom. Some girls ran. They joined the traveling players, or found foreign husbands, but even there the same question followed them. Always the same. Were you pure? You leave them at sundown and find yourself in a tavern near the university district. The walls are covered with smoke-stained tapestries, and the tables hum with conversation. You're drawn to a corner where a woman in scholar's robes drinks ale and scratches notes in the margins of a book. Her name is Beatrice, and she is dangerous. Not because of any weapon, but because of her memory. She remembers everything. Every lecture, every debate, every law that reduced a woman to her body and a man to her desire. She's writing a treatise quietly, discreetly, on the philosophy of consent. She's quoting Ovid to argue against Ovid. She's dissecting the way virtue has been turned into a leash and virginity into a cudgel. When you ask why she risks it, she smiles slowly. Because silence is the first lie they teach us to keep. She lets you read a passage. To be born female is to be born with a question etched upon your skin. Not, what can you do or what might you become, but what have you withheld? And when that question is answered, whether by act or accident, the answer is always final. No appeal, no context, just judgment. She tears the page from her notebook and hands it to you. "Hide it well," she says. "They burn things like that." Outside, night has deepened. Lanterns glow with a soft amber light, casting long shadows across the cobbles. You follow music to a small performance in a courtyard. Musicians pluck lutes and sing ballads, but the lyrics are different. One song tells of a girl who faked madness to avoid marriage, another of a widow who loved again and was punished not by the law but by rumor. The audience claps cheers, but the message is clear. These are not just entertainments. They are confessions in disguise, rebellions sewn into rhyme. You notice a woman alone by the edge of the courtyard. Her dress is too fine for her surroundings, her face veiled. She tells you quietly that she is the daughter of a nobleman, but no longer welcome in his house. Her younger sister accused her of encouraging sin. The sin teaching her to read the love poems hidden between psalms. She sighs. "I did not lose my virginity, but I lost the illusion of it. And that apparently is just as dangerous." You watch her disappear down an alley, her veil caught for a moment on the splintered wood of a fence. Then gone. You find a bench by the city gate and sit for a while, turning Beatrice's page over in your hands. Around you, the city stirs, horses clop past, lovers whisper, dogs bark at unseen things, and you begin to understand. This place, this messy, tangled, brilliant city is full of women who've been written out of history. But they have not vanished. They've become footnotes, rumors, misremembered verses. And now you're writing them back in, not as cautionary tales, not as saints or whores, as people. You hear a bell toll in the distance, midnight perhaps. The city will sleep soon, and when it does, the presses will run again. Another pamphlet, another poem, another question dared aloud. You rise and head toward the gate, the road waiting like an open hand. Beyond lies the next story, and you're ready to follow it. The road unwinds from the city like a ribbon of stone, leading you east toward hills the color of bruised violets and mist. The weight of the city's voices still lingers in your ears. Beatrice's sharp ink, Mireille's knowing smirk, Julita's secret slip of paper. Their truths travel with you, etched not on parchment, but inside the hollows of your ribs. The next place you reach is quiet, pastoral, dotted with farms and soft winds tugging at ripening barley. But don't mistake this quiet for peace. It's a different kind of pressure here. In the countryside, honor clings closer to the skin. Here, everyone knows everyone. There are fewer corners to disappear into, fewer people to forget you. At the edge of one such village, a woman draws water from a well, with emotion so practiced it's like breathing. Her name is Agnes. She is respected, well married, with 2 living children. But when she sees her teenage niece walking with a boy down a dirt path, her jaw tightens. "Too fast," she murmurs. People are already watching her. You follow Agnes home, a tidy, timbered cottage filled with lavender bundles and jars of pickled onions. Her daughter Lynn is 12 and already rehearsing the postures of a good girl, hands folded, eyes down, no questions. Her mother corrects her constantly, not too loud, not too idle, not too curious. "Boys can't help themselves," Agnes says. "It's up to us. It's always up to them." That afternoon, Lynn's cousin, the girl from the path, is called before her father. There's no proof, only a rumor carried by the baker's son. But her father is a serious man. He demands to know if she's still intact. When she hesitates, not understanding the question, he slaps her across the face. Her mother doesn't speak, just stands in the corner, twisting her apron, eyes fixed on the hearth. You slip away as the silence in the room thickens. In the next hamlet, there's a story they still tell in low voices of a girl named Betta who disappeared one winter. They say she'd been caught with a boy from another village. Some say they ran away together. Others say her father drowned her in the river. The truth, no one really knows. But the lesson was clear, and it stuck: don't be like Betta. And so girls walk in pairs, keep their eyes low, smile only when spoken to. They pretend not to understand jokes. They pretend they don't hear the whistles from the mill boys. And if they're caught walking alone, they lie about where they were, even if they were doing nothing, especially then. You come across one such girl in the orchard, hiding in a tree. She startles when she sees you, then relaxes. You don't carry judgment. She tells you her name is Els, and that she likes the quiet. I don't want to be married, she confesses. I just want to stay here, with the trees. But she knows that's not an option. My uncle says I have hips now. That's when the trouble starts. She swings her legs like a pendulum, thoughtful. He thinks I don't understand. But I do. Later that day, the priest preaches a sermon about the sin of temptation. He quotes the story of Susanna, spied upon, falsely accused, nearly killed. He praises her modesty. She resisted. She stayed pure, he says. No one mentions the men who lied, who schemed, who turned their desire into her trial. You notice Els in the pew listening, but she doesn't bow her head. She stares straight ahead, unmoved. You leave the village after dark, stars clustering above the hills. The road glows faintly with moonlight. You come across a traveler by the roadside, an older woman wrapped in a rough wool shawl, humming a lullaby. She introduces herself simply as Nan. No last name, no title. She's been walking for years, she says, looking for a place where the past doesn't follow me. Over a shared crust of bread, she tells you her story. She was 14 when her mother died, sent to live with an uncle. He was kind until he wasn't. She was blamed, of course. The neighbors called her sly, said she was always flaunting herself. One day she left and never went back. She's been on the road ever since. Men don't need proof, she says. Just a story they like better than yours. You walk with her a while. She points out safe places to sleep, villages that look peaceful but aren't, and the kinds of people to avoid, especially those who call themselves pious with too much certainty. She tells you about another woman she met, a midwife named Runa, who traveled with her once. Runa had helped hundreds of women give birth. She never married. When a nobleman's daughter turned up pregnant, they blamed Runa, accused her of leading the girl astray. She fled, left everything behind. Nan doesn't know if she's still alive. These stories all end the same, Nan says, but they begin so differently. You part ways at a fork in the road. Nan gives you a necklace, a simple string with a carved button. Keep it, she says. It belonged to someone who wasn't believed. You remember her for me. The next village is smaller still. Barely a dozen homes clustered around a well. A woman greets you with cautious warmth. Her name is Heloise. She was once a nobleman's mistress, and she makes no effort to hide it. She keeps a clean house, grows her own food, and takes in orphaned girls. I was ruined once, she says with a smirk, And look, I'm still here. You ask how she survived the disgrace. I stopped treating it like disgrace, she answers. That was the trick. She introduces you to the girls she shelters, some silent, some scarred, some only just beginning to speak again. One barely 11 hasn't said a word since arriving. Another draws strange shapes in the dirt and won't look anyone in the eye. But they're healing, slowly, through bread baked with warm hands, through stories that don't end in punishment, through the simple magic of being believed. As you sit in Heloise's garden sipping something tart and herbal, you begin to feel a shift. These stories aren't just tragedies. They're counterspells, proof that survival is possible, that a girl's worth is not a contract or a stain or a silence, that even after all the fires and lies and rituals she can still plant seeds, grow things. You sleep under Heloise's roof that night. And in the morning, one of the girls, tiny wide-eyed, presses a dried flower into your palm. A gift. No words. Just that. You tuck it safely in your pocket. It will not bloom again. But it does not need to, because it already has. The road from Heloise's garden is quiet in the gray morning. Dew clings to your boots as you walk, and the flower in your pocket crinkles gently with every step. The silence feels different now. Not heavy like it did in the convent, or watchful like in the noble houses. This silence is steady, patient, the kind that allows things to grow unseen. You pass through low fields bordered by stone walls and hedgerows. In the distance, a windmill creaks. This land is poorer than the villages before. The homes are smaller, rougher. The people glance up at you with guarded faces. They've learned to mind their own stories and mistrust strangers. At the edge of one such village, a small chapel leans slightly under the weight of its own history. The door hangs crooked on its hinges. Inside, dust motes spin through beams of light. You step carefully between broken pews and find at the back a row of names carved into the wall. Not saints, not martyrs. Just initials and dates, some marked with tiny drawings. A sun, a teardrop, a flower, a flame. And beneath one scratched deeper than the rest, I was good. But it didn't matter. You sit for a moment feeling the ache of that sentence. You've seen it played out again and again, girls who did everything right, who followed every rule and still lost everything, because someone told the wrong story about them. Back outside, you meet an old man who tells you about the girl who carved that message. Her name was Leah. She was apprenticed to the village healer, clever and careful. One winter, she helped a woman give birth. The baby died. Not her fault, but the mother's husband accused her of witchcraft. Said Leah had stolen the baby's soul. She was beaten, dragged to the church, and locked inside until someone could determine her innocence. She lasted 2 nights. The third morning, she was gone. The door was still locked from the outside. They called it a sign from God. The villagers planted rosemary in the doorway to cleanse the air. You walk on. A day later, you come to a bend in the road where a woman is selling charms, little wooden figures, dried herbs, in pouches carved tokens. Her name is Belle. She has the sharp smile of someone who's been burned and come out brighter. She offers you a charm for protection. You ask what kind. Whichever kind you need most, she says. Some girls buy them for luck, others for memory. You ask her what she means by memory. Belle leans closer. You'd be surprised how many girls forget themselves after the first time, after they're told they don't matter anymore. They forget who they were before someone rewrote their story. She shows you a charm carved with a tree. This one's for holding on. You buy it. Further on, you cross a river by a low wooden bridge. Beside it, a faded sign marks the place where a woman was once drowned for unbecoming conduct. No trial, just rumor. Her husband had died in a fight, and when she refused to remarry, the village claimed she was cursed. They accused her of bringing bad luck, of tempting other men, of being too visible, to herself. You trace the grooves in the wood and think again of all the names you haven't learned. The ones not carved into chapel walls. The ones that vanished from family trees, from inheritance scrolls, from memory. You stay the night in a traveler's hut where you meet a woman named Izan. She's a spinner by trade, her fingers constantly busy with thread. She tells you that she grew up in a house where her virginity was guarded like gold. She wasn't allowed to laugh too loud or dance or read certain books, and yet she says, "It was taken from me anyway, in a barn, by someone I trusted." Her parents said nothing, blamed her. She ran away at 15 and never went back. But I wasn't broken, she says, fixing her gaze on you. They only broke the story they wanted me to live in. You ask how she survived. I rewrote it, she says. Thread by thread, I made a new one. It's not neat, but it's mine. You sleep on straw beside the fire. That night you dream of mirrors cracking, not breaking, just fracturing, allowing something new to reflect through. When you wake, Isan is already gone. But on the bench where she'd been spinning, she's left a single strand of red thread coiled like a question. You tie it around your wrist. In the next village you arrive on the day of a funeral. A girl, 15. Her death is described only as a tragedy. No one says more. But you can see the signs, people too silent, too composed. The way her younger sister flinches when a man raises his voice. The way her mother won't look at anyone. You visit the grave when the mourners are gone. Someone has left a basket of daisies. A ribbon tied around the headstone reads, "She said no." No one listened. You kneel in the dirt and whisper her name, not because you know it, but because someone should. You move on. The path is narrow now, pressed between hedgerows and old trees. At a crossroads, you see an engraving on a stone post, "Let her speak." It's not clear who carved it, but it's not alone. You see the same phrase again and again, scratched into benches, painted on stones, inked into tree bark. A secret movement. Small acts of defiance. A collective whisper from the silenced, stitched across the landscape. You reach a farmhouse where the daughters wear knives at their belts. They laugh freely. They ride horses like men. The eldest says, "Our mother taught us to be careful, but not quiet." You stay for supper. They feed you beans and onions and stories. The youngest says she's been kissed once and it wasn't like the song said. The others nod. It never is, one says, but it's ours. Before you leave, their mother places a hand on your shoulder. Tell them, she says, tell them what you've seen. Even if they pretend they don't want to hear it. You promise you will. As night falls, you walk again, the stars bright and sharp. You think of all the women who lived and died under the weight of a lie. Of the girls who carried it silently. Of the ones who turned it into truth because it was easier than being disbelieved. But you also think of those who refused, who carved words in stone, who wrote between the lines, who said yes to themselves when the world told them they weren't allowed to say anything at all. And now, with every step you carry their voices, not as burdens, but as proof. Morning breaks softly, the light gold and slow, as if even the sun feels the weight of what has come before. You walk through fields damp with dew, your boots tracing the path left by others. That red thread from Izan still circles your wrist, warm against your skin. The flower from Heloise's garden is tucked in your pocket. The ink-smeared parchment from Beatrice folded deep in your pack. Little tokens of truth, of resistance, of women who refused to vanish. Ahead lies another town, not rich, not poor, but bound together by a history as tight as stitched cloth. This is a place where generations live stacked upon one another, where grandmothers remember what their grandmothers endured, where everything a girl does can be traced back like a thread, who she looked at, how she walked, what she wore when it rained. You stop at the apothecary nestled between the baker and the smith. Inside, a woman named Emmeline grinds fennel seeds with a rhythmic press of her mortar. She's older now, but her eyes still flash with that wary heat you've come to recognize a woman who knows what it means to be watched. She sells salves for burns, teas for sleep, and quietly, very quietly, little satchels of tansy and pennyroyal to girls who have made choices that weren't theirs to begin with. They never ask why she tells you pressing herbs into a linen pouch. They just hope I'll help them undo the consequences. And I do. But sometimes I want to ask, when will we teach the boys to fear their power? The way we've taught girls to fear theirs. You leave with a tin of balm and her blessing, and something more, a story she shares as you pass through the door. There was a girl named Margot. She came to me late one night bleeding, not from birth, from what someone took. She was more afraid of what her parents would say than of dying. Emmeline's mouth hardens. She survived, but they sent her away, far away, somewhere they wouldn't have to look her in the eye. You ask if she ever returned. No, Emmeline says, but I still remember the way she held my hand, like she was trying to hold on to herself. Outside, the air feels colder. You walk past a schoolhouse where children recite verses aloud. The boys speak confidently. The girls quieter, more cautious, even in repetition. You recognize the rhythm of it. Even learning must be ladylike. One girl, small and sharp-eyed, glances at you as you pass. There's a smudge of ink on her chin. Her fingers clutch a worn book of psalms. But someone has tucked a note between the pages. Your body is not their lesson. You smile. It's not much, but it's something. Down the lane, a man repairs a wagon axle. You overhear him speaking to his son, warning him to keep the girls in line when the harvest festival arrives. They act sweet, but you know how they are, he says. The boy laughs and nods, and there it is again. The inheritance, passed from father to son like a knife dressed in humor. You press on. At the edge of town, a woman named Isolde tends an orchard. She's wiry, sun-weathered, and quiet. But when you compliment her fruit, she invites you to share an apple. You sit under a pear tree and she tells you slowly about her youth. She was once a chambermaid in a bishop's estate, praised for her neatness, her discretion, until the bishop's nephew took an interest. He said he was in love, she says, but when he got what he wanted, he called me a whore. She pauses. His family sent him to university. I was dismissed. No warning. Just gone. You ask how she ended up here. I made cider, she says simply. Sold it until I had enough for the land. Grew something with my own hands that couldn't be taken. You stay the night in her barn. The stars blink above the trees, soft and small. The next morning, you pass a crumbling chapel turned into a library. Inside, an old priest catalogs books. He recognizes your tired eyes, your listening posture. He tells you that when he was young, he buried a girl. She'd been accused of seduction. No one claimed her. No one mourned. He asked the bishop if she could be remembered in prayer. The bishop refused. So the priest prayed anyway. Every day since. You ask him her name. Leona, he says. She wore a green ribbon. I still see it in my dreams. He gives you a book. It's not valuable. Just a record of names women excommunicated, punished, forgotten. The ink is faded, some pages torn, but her name is there. Leona, age 17, accused, died in winter. You carry it with reverence. Further down the road, a group of young women walk together with baskets of cloth. They're laughing, loudly, unapologetically. When they see you, one lifts her chin and says, "If you're writing a story, make sure you get this part right." What part, you ask? The part where we're not just victims, she says. We're witnesses, survivors, even jokes. You can write that we laughed. Another adds, and that we want more than to be worthy wives. We want to be whole. They pass skirts brushing wildflowers unafraid. Later, near a crossroad, you meet a man who asks why you're walking alone. You tell him you're listening. He scoffs. Women talk too much as it is. You smile politely, but say nothing, because you've heard enough by now to recognize a wall when you see it, and how to walk around it. By evening, you reach a hilltop where someone has built a cairn of stones, one for every woman who was sent away. A few names are scratched into the rocks. Most are blank. You add one not yours, but the one from the chapel wall. I was good, but it didn't matter. And beside it, you scratch a second. But I lived anyway. As the wind rises, you look out over the fields toward the next village in the valley below. Another place filled with stories echoes half-truths waiting to be untangled. You begin to descend. The road curves soft and low, and in the distance, you hear the faint sound of a girl singing. Not a hymn, not a lullaby. Something else entirely. Her own song. You follow the song down into the valley, the melody threading through the air, like silk through a loom light, delicate and entirely unafraid. The girl's voice rises and falls not in performance, but in possession. It belongs to her and no one else. You come upon her in a sun-dappled meadow, sitting barefoot atop a boulder, plucking petals from a daisy without cruelty. She sees you watching, but doesn't stop singing. Not until the song ends. Then she smiles, not shyly, not boldly, just honestly. "My name's Rix," she says. "They say I'm too loud." So I decided to sing louder. You sit for a moment and she tells you she's 17. She won't marry. Not because she fears it, but because she's been told all her life that she must, and that to her is reason enough to ask why. She laughs when she tells you the priest refused her communion once for being immodest. What had she done? Danced alone during a rainstorm, fully clothed, arms open to the sky. They said I was inviting something, she says. I told them I was, but not them. You walk with her toward the village where she lives. It's small, and the people here know better than to trust too much. but Rix is tolerated, half admired, half feared. She helps birth animals, gathers herbs, sings in the woods, and asks questions no one wants to answer. In her cottage, there's a shelf lined with tokens, ribbons, feathers, bits of broken combs and buttons. Gifts from girls who've come to her with bruised hearts or swollen bellies or eyes full of silence. She listens, never repeats. She teaches them how to listen to themselves again. Rix tells you she once loved a girl named Mina. They kissed behind the stables, shy and unsure. It was tender, not scandalous. But Mina's father found out. She was married off within the month, an older widower with no patience for disobedience. Rix never saw her again. I didn't cry, she says, not because it didn't hurt, but because I didn't want to give them that. You sleep near the hearth that night, Rix's songs humming through the walls like bees in clover. And when you leave in the morning, she presses a tiny blue stone into your hand. For clarity, she says, you'll need it. The stories get stranger ahead. And she's right. The next village is nothing like hers. You arrive at the edge of a field where women and girls are gathered in a tight circle. You think for a moment that it's a celebration, but it's not. They're standing around a young girl, barely 12, who's been accused of provoking a boy from town. The boy is older, much, a cousin of the Reeve. He claims she lured him behind the barn. She says he followed her, that he pulled at her braid, that she was scared. But no one's asking her anymore. They're deciding what to do. One woman suggests she be locked away for her own protection. Another says she should be married early before she does something worse. Worse than being followed. Worse than being afraid. No one says his name aloud. He's not here. He doesn't need to be. His place is secure. Hers is the one in jeopardy. You step away, the girl's silence still clinging to you like ash. You visit the church where the priest avoids your eyes. He speaks of natural order, of female temptation, of original sin. And suddenly you feel it all over again, that centuries-old layering of suspicion on every girl who dares to exist visibly. You leave mid-sermon. No one stops you. That night, you find shelter in the loft of a barn at the village edge. A widow owns it, stern but not unkind. She brings you broth and a crust of bread. Her name is Alfrin. She keeps to herself. Once a midwife, but not anymore. A scandal, she says. A nobleman's daughter died during a delivery she wasn't even attending. It was enough, Alfrin says. They needed someone to blame. You ask why she didn't fight back. She looks out the window for a long time before answering. Because no one would have believed me, and I was tired of begging to be heard. You understand. She tells you of her daughter Freya, who grew up defiant, smart, beautiful, reckless. People watched her too closely. Boys whispered her name like a dare. One of them got her alone, then claimed she'd begged for it. Freya told the truth. The town believed him. She left, Alfrin says. She sends letters sometimes, from the coast. She found a woman who listens. She smiles faintly. It's more than I had. You fall asleep to the sound of owls and the distant bark of a dog. And when you wake, the sky is a pale wash of blue. You think of Freya, of Mina, of Betta and Leona, and all the girls whose names you've whispered into dirt and wind. You think of the girl in the circle, and you keep walking. The next place you come to is barely marked on the road, an old fortress now converted into a sort of home for women with nowhere else to go. Not a convent, not a brothel. Something else. They call it the keep. It's quiet but alive. Inside, women move with purpose. They carry water, they sow, they tend gardens and care for one another. There's laughter. Real laughter. Some women are old, others young. A few carry babies. Most carry scars. You meet their leader, Magda, tall, graying with a voice like gravel and honey. She doesn't waste time on introductions. We're not here to erase our pasts, she says. We're here to stop apologizing for them. You spend the night. And another. You speak to a woman who once served in a royal court, but was exiled after refusing her lord's advances. Another who had 5 children by 4 men, and no shame in any of it. One who never touched anyone at all, and was still called deviant for not wanting to. They are not defined by what they did or didn't do. They are not defined by what was done to them. They define themselves. Magda tells you that they host women in secret, sometimes girls running from violence wives, fleeing punishment, lovers, escaping forced marriages. The church suspects but can't prove anything. And even if they could, there would be no appetite for scandal. The keep is too small, too quiet, too inconvenient. Sometimes being invisible works in our favor, she says. You understand. The whisper you've been hearing all this time. It's not just lament. It's survival, it's strategy, it's language. Before you go, one of the women no name offered presses something into your hand. A needle. To sew your own story, she says, or to mend someone else's. And you know exactly what she means. The road waits again. The sky is beginning to shift. A storm, perhaps, or something else. You walk toward it not with fear, but with fire. The wind rises as you leave the keep behind, tugging at your cloak like fingers urging you onward. The road narrows stone, giving way to worn earth, and the sky above churns in steel-colored waves. The scent of rain hovers waiting. This final stretch feels different, like you've crossed some invisible line, not into danger, but into knowing. You pass no travelers, only trees that lean as if they too are listening. At a bend in the path, you see an old milestone nearly swallowed by weeds. Carved into its moss-darkened face are the words, "She was never lost, only hidden." You brush the moss away gently and move on. The first village you reach is quiet, but not asleep. A girl named Alira meets you at the edge. She's maybe 16, her hair in 2 long braids, her gaze level. She recognizes something in you, maybe the thread around your wrist or the weight in your step. You follow her to a cottage where several girls are gathered, all sitting around a table, weaving dried flowers into cords. They don't stop talking when you enter. They don't lower their voices. Their stories fill the room like warmth from a hearth. One tells of being accused of seduction after her uncle saw her adjusting her bodice. She was 13. Another says her fiancé broke the engagement when he learned she'd been assaulted, even though she had fought back, even though it wasn't her fault. They're not sharing these stories for sympathy. They're naming them, out loud. No shame, no bending of their voices to please invisible judges. Alira brings you tea. She sits beside you and says, "We were told our bodies were problems to be solved. But we aren't problems. We're stories. And we get to write them now." You stay with them through the evening. They show you